What's up, everybody? In this video, I want to spend some time talking with you about a topic I'm very passionate about. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you will understand why. So, there is no doubt that solar eclipses are spectacular to witness. And a couple of times in these past several months, I got a chance to do just that. Beginning one morning on October 14th, 2023, I woke up, opened my computer, went to timeanddate.com, and I watched a model predicting exactly what I would see about 3 hours later from my location in Dallas, Texas. From that location, it was predicted that I would see only about 80% of the sun's light blocked out by the moon. Now, I've always known that scientists understood extremely well why eclipses occur. And I've always known that they can make exact mathematical calculations and predictions for when an eclipse will occur for any location on planet Earth and what an observer would see from that particular geographical location. But it's really cool when you get a chance to prove these mathematical models for yourself and you get to video document them using your own telescope and equipment. When we compare what I actually saw through my hydrogen alpha telescope with the model from the internet, clearly the model matches reality very well. On April the 8th, 2024, I got a chance to witness another eclipse, but this time it was a total eclipse. I did not use my telescope for this event because I wanted to experience the fullness of the moment without any distractions. But I got a couple of pictures a friend sent me from that day. Since scientists understand how to predict eclipses in the future and how to accurately calculate eclipses from ancient written records, one thing we can use them for is to establish a factual historical chronology of the Bible. In other words, they allow us to assign numerical dates to events in biblical history. To achieve this, scholars need to look at other sources from the ancient Near East as a reference point. We actually have Assyrian sources mentioning the observation of a total eclipse of the sun during the year or eponym of Bur-Sagali, probably the most important eclipse in ancient recorded history. Astronomers who have looked at these sources have calculated this eclipse would have occurred on June the 15th, 763 BC. Once we have assigned a specific date to this particular year during this particular eponym, scholars can then assign dates to other eponyms in Assyrian history because that's how detailed those ancient records are. Once we have factual numerical years assigned to these records, we can then use these exact numbers to transfer them onto the Bible. This then gives us absolute historical dates for the reigns of all the biblical kings. We are able to do this because Assyrian records overlap with the Bible in multiple ways, and they are completely independent of each other. For example, the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III mentions the biblical king Jehu on the black obelisk where he is shown bowing down and paying tribute to the ruler of Assyria. This would have occurred during Jehu's first year as king in 841 BC. Once we have absolute dates for the kings of the Bible, which we obtained from a solar eclipse synchronization, we can then calculate the 4th year of King Solomon to the year 967 BC. We can do this calculation by reasoning from all the information and the numbers given to us in the Book of Kings. Counting backwards in time 479 years takes us back to the Exodus in 1446 BC. And adding another 430 years to that takes us back to 1876 BC, the first year Jacob, the father of Joseph, came into Egypt. Going back to around 1876 BC takes us all the way back to Egypt's 12th dynasty. The method scholars use to date Egyptian history for this dynasty does not involve solar eclipses, but on observations involving the heliacal rising of the star Sirius in the early morning sky. Without going into the details, this method of calculating Egyptian history is independent of how we calculate the Bible's history, as we just discussed. So, now that we know the time the Israelites would have came into Egypt, we can now assess what the Bible says and compare it to Egypt's historical and archaeological record of the same period. This way, we can test whether or not the major Bible narratives that occurred in Egypt really happened. During this time in Egypt's history, a pharaoh by the name of Sesostris II was in power in Egypt. Sesostris II was responsible for ordering a major agricultural project to mass produce food on an enormous scale that would feed the population of Egypt. His officials basically turned the Fayum region into a breadbasket. This would even feed the city of Rome later on in the period of the Roman Empire. This task was so important to his reign and something he wanted to be remembered for that he actually ordered his pyramid to be built near the Fayum itself to commemorate this achievement. This is something the Egyptologist John Romer mentions in page 473 of volume 2 of his book covering Egypt's Middle Kingdom. Clearly, Sesostris II wanted this to be an important marker for his reign. Now, is it by coincidence this just so happens to be around the same time the Bible tells us that Pharaoh and Joseph were preparing storage of grains in preparation for a major famine that was predicted to last 7 years? Do we have other reasons to believe that the Bible is describing actual history? Around this time period in Egypt's 12th dynasty, we also have archaeological evidence of a group of foreigners coming from the Levant and settling in Egypt. They lived at a location known as Avaris. We know these people were not native Egyptians because we have their burials, which have survived to the present day. The style of the burials and the tools they were buried with indicates they were Semitic and entered Egypt from the north. They also were very powerful and very wealthy. One of them even had an enormous statue built for him. Scholar Dr. Douglas Petrovich believes this is a statue of the biblical Jacob, while other scholars believe this is a statue of Joseph. Either option would be cool, in my opinion. Inscriptions from the Sinai Desert at this time tell us about one of these important foreigners. He goes by the Egyptian name Hebeded. Hebeded identifies himself as the brother of the ruler over these Semitic foreigners. This ruler obtained his power from the vizier. The vizier is the title given to the second in command of Egypt after Pharaoh. On one of the inscriptions in the Sinai, Hebeded has a little boy shown in front of him with the name Shechem, which is not an Egyptian name. Shechem is a Semitic name. There appears to be a strong match between the Bible and Egyptian history. The Bible tells us that Joseph, who started off as a slave, gained favor with Pharaoh because of his prophetic abilities and was made second in command over all of Egypt. Eventually, Joseph gave birth to two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, according to the Bible, even though Ephraim was the younger of the two, he will be made greater than his older brother. This pattern appears very similar to the Egyptian record for this time period. Sobek-Emhat, who is vizier in Egypt, appoints a ruler over foreigners living at Avaris. This ruler goes by the name of the Sobek-Emhat, and he has a brother whom we already identified as Hebeded. From several inscriptions in the Sinai, Hebeded has a little boy in front of him with the name Shechem, as we already discussed. This is the exact name that we find in the Bible when we read Joshua 17:2, which gives a list of the names of the sons of Manasseh, which means Manasseh's Egyptian name was Hebeded, and one of Joseph's Egyptian name was Sobek-Emhat. Very, very cool. Dr. Petrovich gives more evidence in his book to show convincingly why these names are to be identified with these particular biblical figures. In addition to this, the two chronologies overlap perfectly as determined from independent astronomical calculations. Now, there is more to discuss, which I don't have time to do in this video. I'll save those topics for future videos, but I do want to say this. Initially, when I first learned about all this from Douglas Petrovich, I was skeptical. After all, I'm not an expert in Egyptology. I'm just a high school chemistry teacher. So I decided to look up these facts in other sources from experts that don't necessarily have obvious biases. I even purchased for myself the very rare original publications of the Sinai inscriptions from 1921 and 1955 when Gardner first published them. Because these books are hard to find, they were super expensive to buy, but the contents inside made them so worth it. I was super excited about what I found in them. Sure enough, Gardner reads the exact same name Shechem on these inscriptions as does Douglas Petrovich, who was the first to recognize these connections. Considering Shechem is not a common personal name of individuals in the Bible, this connection with an independent Egyptian source convinced me out of my skepticism. And just to be clear, Dr. Petrovich is not the first to interpret these inscriptions. He is just the first to notice these obscure details and their connections with the Bible. To be able to witness these connections in my lifetime is pretty exciting. I had grown up learning about biblical figures such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and Moses. But to be able to see independent confirmation of evidence that these men really lived and even had a major connection with Egypt, that was something I did not expect to find. Of course, archaeology and science can't prove every single claim mentioned in the Bible, but to see so much of it consistent with the Bible in very specific details is something I think we can all learn from. There is more to speak about, which I don't have time to do in this video, but I would recommend you check out Dr. Petrovich's book if you are interested in learning more about these connections. I would also recommend these additional resources as well. In any case, I hope you all learned something today. I want to give special thanks to my friend Deneric for the eclipse photos. And also, I want to give thanks to my former student Juliana for the artwork in this video. Juliana, I know you spent a lot of time on that, and I really appreciate it. Well, be blessed, everyone, and I hope to discuss more of this with you in the future. Have a good one, and bye.